Good afternoon, I'm Vin Weber. I was Rudy's campaign manager in 1978, and then for a year or so was his state office manager until he talked me into running for Congress in 1980. I wouldn't have run without Rudy's encouragement, and I certainly wouldn't have won without his support. That's just one way in which Rudy Boschwitz has affected my life and the life of so many people around me. Another person that was affected by Rudy so substantially was my friend Steve Gordon. Steve and I worked together on the 1978 Boschwitz campaign. He had not had any real role in politics before, but worked full-time on it, and he's been doing well ever since. Steve and I got together at one point and thought, nobody's had a greater impact on our lives than Rudy Boschwitz, other than perhaps our parents. And we decided to try to do something to honor him properly and help celebrate his life and talk to people who may not have known about him, about Rudy Boschwitz's life. So in October of 2017, we had a live event at the Humphrey School, which many people participated in. And it was a wonderful event. We promised at the end of that we would have a film made that would talk about Rudy's life and help share it with far more people. It took a few years for us to do that, a little longer than we thought, but it was a labor of love. We enjoyed it a lot. And we today are ready to unveil that on the near avenue of Rudy's 90th birthday. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my friend Steve. We have 225 people that have participated or registered to participate in this Zoom event. Obviously, they'd all like to get on camera and say hi to Rudy, but we can't quite manage that technologically. But we do have a number of people, prominent people who've worked with Rudy in the Senate and elsewhere, to say hello. And I thought I'd ask Steve Gordon at this point to tell us a little bit about that aspect of the program, the putting together of the film, and to introduce some of the people that are going to be extending their well wishes to Rudy.
There's no question that meeting Rudy changed my life and changed the direction of my life in 1970. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to be a part of this birthday celebration. And I'm very pleased to have worked with Ben to create a movie about Rudy and Rudy's life, in a film that we call Rudy Boschwitz, An American Life. Now, we probably could have spent 2 hours or 2 days or maybe 2 weeks filled up with best wishes and good wishes that we would receive from many of Rudy's colleagues and friends. But what we decided to do is go ahead and pick out 4 people that really epitomize the respect that Rudy has, not only in Washington and Minnesota, but around the country. So the tape you're going to see includes Senator Mitch McConnell, the Majority Leader, Senator John Thune, the Majority Whip, former Senator Bob Dole, former Majority Leader, and Norm Coleman, the former U.S. Senator from Minnesota. Let's run the tape.
Hey, Rudy, happy 90th birthday. You know, it's hard to believe you left us involuntarily 30 years ago, but you've been the one former member who's continued to take an interest in your Senate colleagues and continuing to have a Senate majority. So thanks again for sticking with us for 30 years. Happy birthday, buddy.
Happy 90th birthday, Rudy. I hope you and Ellen and the family and your friends are celebrating in style. Nobody deserves it more. You are, and I don't use this word lightly, a true patriot, and we are grateful for the many ways that you've contributed to the success of this country, to the betterment of this country for so many years, both as an elected official, as a UN ambassador on human rights. We are just enormously grateful for your many contributions. And on a personal level, of course, you have been a mentor to me, an advisor, a friend, a prolific fundraiser. I've told you this many times, that the best fundraising event that I ever had when I was running for the Senate in 2004 was one that you organized for us in Minneapolis. Still stands out. The way that you stepped up, not only for me, but for so many of our candidates through the years. You are relentless. Nobody can say no to Rudy Boschwitz. And you maybe don't remember this, but I was on your staff for a short amount of time when you were the ranking Republican on the Senate Small Business Committee. I was a staffer, and so I worked for you in that role as well. But I'll never forget, on just a more personal and human level, after I lost my first Senate election, when you and Ellen were on your way through, you called me, and we got together at a Perkins on Interstate 29, and you just talked me through how, losing election isn't the worst thing in the world. And it was almost like you cued it, that somebody came up to you as we were checking out and remembered you from your service. And you said there are events like that that are going to continue to define you as you go through life. And that meant a lot to me at the time, but again, it reflects on you and your character. And I'm just grateful for your friendship through the years. I want to wish you a wonderful, happy birthday. Happy 90th, Rudy.
Hey, Rudy, I want to wish you a very, very happy birthday. You're a senator I can trust because you can't run for president. You were born in Germany. So that makes everything work out fine. And let me add that you were a great senator from Minnesota, and I could always trust you to do the right thing. And the right thing was to follow me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Norm Coleman, former United States Senator from Minnesota, having served in the Boschwitz seat in the U.S. Senate. And I'm here really to wish you a happy 90th and just simply say thank you. Pay tribute, as I'm sure many others are, but tribute so well deserved. Rudy, you've represented the American dream. You started an immigrant, little or nothing, worked your way up, became a success in business, then turned to politics, a success in politics, success as a public servant, an incredible senator, served this country so well, never forgot where you came from at all, always with humility, always humble, continued to stay involved afterwards. One of the challenges in Washington is remaining relevant after you leave office. A couple of decades later, Rudy Boschwitz is still relevant. He's probably got more friends certainly on the Republican side of the aisle, and I wouldn't doubt on the Democrat side, but more friends than anyone that I can imagine, because he's been there for our folks. He's been there for our team. He's been there for our country. He's there for those of us that care about the U.S.-Israel relationship. I don't think there has been a stronger individual in the history of the Senate who's been a greater friend, a stronger friend of the U.S.-Israel relationship than Senator Rudy Boschwitz. The extraordinary role he played in bringing the Ethiopian Jews out of the diaspora, back to Jerusalem. So Rudy, you have been extraordinary. You have taught me so much. You have guided me. You and Ellen have been an inspiration to so many families. You can't mention Rudy Bosch without mentioning Ellen. They are the dynamic duo. They are inseparable, and they're both extraordinary. So Rudy, on this occasion of your 90th birthday, I'm wishing you a happy birthday and wishing for many, many, many more, because you've still got lots to do. You got the power, you got the energy, you got the intellect to do it. And we love you, and we want to keep working by your side. Rudy, Ellen, God bless you both. Happy birthday.
Thank you all. Let me read a special letter if I can. Dear Rudy, happy 90th birthday. Laura and I are delighted to be among the well-wishers remembering you on your special day. You have led a remarkable life that is great in accomplishments and great in years. I appreciate your contributions to your community and to our nation. We hope your celebration is marked by the love of family and friends. May the coming year bring you and Ellen health and happiness. Sincerely, President George W. Bush. So as it's been mentioned, this whole idea got started when we realized that other than our parents, no one else has had a greater impact on our lives than Rudy Boschwitz. And it's not even close. So we wanted to do a film about his life and his family and his career. But going from a vision to a reality is a long way. And as been mentioned, it's been 4 years on this, but it's been a labor of love, but it's been 4 years. We needed a pro, someone that could turn our vision into reality, someone with experience, someone with the time and commitment that could turn our vision into something that was really first rate. And Joe Weber did just that. Joe I want you to know that we are sincerely grateful for everything you did. We couldn't have done this without you. We're grateful for you. While I'm doing that, let me thank 3 other people, please. Dana Marston is my total spectrum partner. I can't get along any day without her, and I couldn't have done any of this without her, and I thank you. And same for Ramona Lesson, 34 years in the Senate. Every single day she makes me look smarter than I am, and I thank her for that. Greg Gibson, who's the producer of this, first rate, and I thank you, Greg. Vin, why don't you go ahead and tee up the movie, and let's see An American Life.
Thanks, Steve. I want to just add also, just on a personal note, Steve was nice enough to mention that my brother Joe gave us immeasurable help in this process. And since we were raising the money for the deal and he didn't charge us anything, that's a double benefit. Thanks, Joe. We're going to go to the film in just a second. And I just want to make a couple of comments about it for people, not many. I've always thought that Rudy Boschwitz had an enormous impact on Minnesota politics. He built an organization at a time when the Republican Party was devastated by the Watergate scandal, and it didn't slow him down a bit. I remember going with him campaigning in places that never had elected Republicans, recruiting people, building an organization against the backdrop of Watergate. That was a huge accomplishment that everybody who's been elected as a Republican then and since has benefited from. But in putting this film together, it really occurred to me, especially in this environment, there's an awful lot more to the Boschwitz story in terms of its impact on America. We're sadly, in my view, living through a time when a lot of America is being questioned by people around the world and a lot of people in this country, our history, our impact on the world, our impact on the people that live here. I think that's very unfortunate. But I think if you look at the story of Rudy and the Boschwitz family, you're reminded of the tremendous good that America has done over generations and really centuries for so many people from all over the world. So I found it an inspirational experience to be involved with it, even though I've known Rudy since the 1970s. I hadn't quite thought about it in those terms. I hope you will find the film equally inspiring and enjoyable. So let's watch Rudy Boschwitz, An American Life.
I'm Rudy Boschwitz, and as many of you know, I've formally announced my candidacy for the United States Senate. I owe a lot to Minnesota. You've been good to me, and I've tried to return that friendship. I don't think I've ever asked more from others than I've personally been willing to give in return. So when I ask you now for your help and your thoughts and your support, I recognize the commitment I'll have to you, and I will not let you down. I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1930. My father, I was kind of a late arrival in his life. He was a manufacturer of lamps, and then he had a metal stamping company. And he did that and went to Berlin in the latter part of the 19th century. And at the time, he was a judge. He wasn't a lawyer, but the Germans always upgraded titles by a step or two. It was quite an honor for a Jewish businessman. He thought because of the difficulties that Germany had encountered, the Germans might follow the path that Hitler had outlined in Mein Kampf. And Hitler came to power on January 30th, 1933. And on that day, my father came home and told my mom, "We're going to leave Germany forever." It was an extraordinary, foresightful act.
Of course, Hitler was in the scene already for several years. This is a period of political turmoil, of economical hardship in Germany. And then 1929 is when the world economic crisis hits, and Germany at that time is ready for a strong leader that gives solutions for the problems of Germany. Of course, these are easy solutions to complex problems, and this is the rise of fascism. All of that is already in Hitler's vision. And as happened only in a few months, in 1933, he managed to end German democracy. Jews were discriminated, Political enemies were crushed. Political adversaries became enemies. You have a massive nationwide boycott to Jewish-owned businesses. Then you have the book burning of so-called un-German authors. This was witnessed by the Boschwitz family. So I would assume that witnessing all this happening so fast made them quite certain that leaving Germany at that time was the right decision, without the foresight of leaving Germany at that time, as other German Jews did, but many also did not and had to suffer the consequences.
We went from country to country, first to Slovakia, then to Switzerland, and to Holland, and to England, looking for a consul who would say, "You're German, you can go on the German quota." And finally, in London, in England, we found such a consul, and he said, "You can go to America," and we arrived here in December 23rd, 1935. On one side of the ship, it was very blowy, and you had to hold on to the rails. And on the other side of the ship, it was quite sunny and pleasant, and I just liked the ship. And I'm a good sailor from the standpoint I don't get seasick. And my father and I, the rest of the family, got seasick, but it was a fun crossing. My father, he was already successful, and so he bought a car and hired a chauffeur and never learned how to drive. This is before air conditioning was really common, so they wanted to get away from the humidity of New York. So I drove him up to Lake Placid. He says, "Stay for the summer." And I said, "Well, you know, I just concluded law school, and so I was ready to stay for a couple of weeks. But I told my dad I had to get a job, as he had suggested for some period of time I do. And I'll stay for a couple of weeks." And so he sent me around to meet Ellen Lowenstein. And he thought, well, maybe he'll stay for 4 weeks if he meets this young woman.
My parents were German, but were married and living in Switzerland at the time of my birth. My father, being a cautious person, said, well, we don't know, what's going to happen. Is Hitler going to come here? And so we left, ended up in Brazil, and stayed in Brazil until we were able to get our visa to come to New York, which was in 1941.
And there, our parents became familiar with one another, and that's how we eventually met.
My first memory is when you came over one afternoon, and I remember the first thing we did was we did a crossword puzzle together.
I stayed all summer, and I proposed at the end of the summer.
The plan wasn't to get married right then and there and
No.
run off or anything like that. It was,
No, her father would have not agreed to that at all.
he was very strict.
And when I took Ellen out, first night, he asked where we're going and didn't approve of any of the suggestions I made. And he said, "This is where you should go." The hotel, Grand View Hotel, where there was an Austrian orchestra and where you could dance. I said that sounded fine. He put on his hat and coat, as did my mother-in-law, and they came along.
We all went together.
And after a couple of nights, my father said, "Why am I sitting at home?" So he came too. And on most nights we had company, but we had a wonderful romance.
But then you were going to be drafted.
Yeah.
At that time there was a draft, so
I liked the army. I even liked the food. And I was in charge of a barracks building down at Camp Gordon. And it's the first time I had ever been in charge of anything. It was part of the maturing process, and I enjoyed it. And then in Hawaii, I enjoyed it.
well, you had the newspaper in Hawaii.
I was working in a signal corps only at night from 11 to 7, and I ran the newspaper in the daytime. The other soldiers would all go down to the beaches and court the young ladies, and I would go to my office in downtown Wahiawa. And the major who ran our company always used to look in astonishment Why is this fellow different?
He is different.
I tried to marry Ellen by phone, but that didn't work out.
Well, I was in my sophomore year in college and I wanted to finish out my year. So we married after that. And then we lived in New York for a year.
That was an interesting time in the practice of law downtown on Wall Street.
You'd get home at like 4 a.m. sometimes.
Really? I
Yeah,
forget that.
Yeah, and I was a young bride. I wasn't used to that. So and then came out to the Middle West.
My older brother married a young woman. We're all immigrants from Poland, and her father was in the plywood business in Poland. When he came to this country, he started up all over again. They found a defunct factory in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where they could install my brother. They began to recruit me to come to Oshkosh, which eventually we did. I was my brother's sales manager, and we had customers all over the country. It was a very nice 6 years that we spent there, but 6 years was adequate. I didn't want to go somewhere where I would interfere with one of his customers, and we didn't have a customer up here in Minneapolis, and that's where the boys began to come.
Jerry and Ken and Dan were born in Oshkosh, and then Tom was born here. Yeah, well, they had a nice time growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we lived on a kind of a hobby farm thing in Plymouth. We had some acreage, so they had a pretty good time.
Yeah, I can remember as kids, when we would argue that Mom and Dad, especially Dad, would tell us, don't get too crossways with your brothers, because they'll be the people that you can rely on in the future.
When we were kids in the plywood business, we'd go on vacation and visit plywood stores or factories and so forth.
Factories, yep.
We were really the earliest franchisor in the whole building materials line of businesses, and we received a franchise fee because we did so much advertising.
Do-it-yourself businesses was a unique concept that Rudy and a few others at that time pioneered, and it was a very innovative thing that happened in the 60s when people had home ownership and they had some money and they wanted to improve their homes and they wanted to do it themselves, and those guys were pioneers.
That's how the arm swinging started in the commercials, as we were so nervous about being on camera that, yep.
The Shaw carpet on sale.
That's right. Direct from the factory to you.
Plywood, Minnesota remnants start as low as $36. This install your own urethane back carpet is only $4.99. Or custom order from the world's finest mills. Kid, don't forget, save now on Delmar window treatments. Yep, up to 50% off. Plywood, Minnesota, we're the value givers. Direct from the factory to you.
When he started Plywood, Minnesota, they had all kinds of attention-getting retail efforts, and he was a master at that.
Well, the one that people talk about is the bullfighting ad.
The bullfighting is, get bullfighting out of Minnesota.
Phil in the Mississippi, join Minneapolis and St. Paul. Phil in the Mississippi.
Phil in the Mississippi, that's right.
I remember Dad and Dale Holschel sitting in the kitchen working on ads and just laughing.
We just did a lot of strange things that had very little to do with plywood, but made our company a household name very rapidly. I came to Minnesota to start a business, and politics were really not in my dreams at all. I became a contributor to the Republican Party, and so identified myself as a Republican. And in 1968, and I'd only been here 5 years, they came around and asked me to be the state chairman for Nixon, running against Hubert Humphrey, who I liked, and to whom I had contributed, and with whom I had lunch. They talked me into it.
Then Weber, let me start with you. You started traveling the state of Minnesota, 1974, with Rudy Boschwitz. He wasn't even running for Senate at that point. What was going on?
He was a celebrity from his doing television ads for his business, and he was the Republican National Committee man. He did a number of things that most other candidates, most other politicians would not do, like campaigning for candidates in the most democratic areas of the state. And Rudy just had a strong belief that the Republican Party had to be competitive everywhere and show that they cared about everybody. We weren't going to win everywhere, but we were going to be a statewide party and a national party.
He worked the ground from the 60s on. He did what Vin described. And so it was not just a businessman deciding, I think I can make a difference in the U.S. Senate. This is someone who was intimately involved for years in both building the party and building his understanding of the party and what it took to win an election.
It was Rudy's campaign in 1978, the first time that he ran for the Senate. And I had just gone to work for the Pioneer Press the previous year. I got assigned to cover that statewide campaign.
The party wanted him to run. He was a favorite of the local Republicans. But he had been thinking about running for a long time.
I was new to politics. I wasn't involved in November, I believe it was, of '77, when Rudy went on the air very early. It was most unusual, and if I remember correctly, he was sitting in his house in front of a fireplace, and it was a way to introduce Rudy. And they'd hired Bob Goodman, who is a very talented national political advertising guru, and developed the first flight of commercials in the winter. And it was Gather Round Minnesota to the song. He was well known, but in a different context. So to reintroduce Rudy to voters as the candidate and take advantage of that folksyism that he had already established was critical.
Gather round, Minnesota, gather round. Rudy Boschwitz coming into town. He'll be part of you and me down in Washington, D.C. when the U.S. Senate gathers round. When the U.S. Senate gathers round.
Rudy Boschwitz, he's you and me, and that's what a Minnesota senator should be.
After the convention, I went out with Rudy and Ellen on the road. They had a station wagon. I think it was just the three of us in the station wagon, and he just drove around the state. It was county fair time, late summer.
It was a great experience, and getting to know the state and the people.
Minnesota is a pretty state and a lovely state, and the people are very nice.
Everywhere we'd go, we'd stop, and there would be a crowd. People would come out because Rudy had gotten involved in their charities and had helped them, not just contributing money, but he'd come and personally worked with them and gave them his time. And so people were really excited and enthusiastic about him. And it was really unusual to go out with somebody who was that well known, who was running for the first time.
So he would call up people and say, can I stay with you? Whether it be on the sofa or on the bed, and have coffee with them the next day and get to know their problems, get to know exactly where they're coming from. He has a unique ability to connect with people.
It was the cheap, efficient way to do it, but it also built up a rapport with all those people that were part of the team.
He had this broad list of people at a time when the Republican Party really didn't have an organization, and it became the organization of the Republican Party.
The first time I had a substantive conversation with Rudy, second thing he said was, if everybody's looking at one side of the street, you'd be a fool not to at least look at the other. While everybody was talking about fat cats, we were creating the concept for skinny cats, small contributors. We very much tried to think outside the box.
He didn't look like a Senate candidate.
But they talked about him with his plaid shirts,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was very folksy and appealed to people that way.
He'd put on a sport coat, he'd still have usually a plaid flannel shirt when he was meeting it.
Things were informal, and I like plaid, and I like colorful, and it certainly was an identifying marker for me.
As Rudy traveled, as his ads were taking effect into the summer, I don't remember, he was probably 8-10 points ahead before the primary. And all of a sudden, Wendy Anderson was ahead in the polls. That night, he said, well, let's go back to work. And he went to a bowling alley and started shaking hands. Wendy was 99th out of 100 in terms of voting attendance. We had talked with our pollster, and he said, Jan, We need a nut cruncher of a commercial on the issue of self-appointment.
No, I'm sorry. Senator Anderson is not in today.
It's nothing
No,
new.
the senator isn't in
Our
today.
self-appointed senator missed well over half the votes in the Senate this year, and a lot were very important to us. Out of 100 senators, Senator Anderson ranked 99th in attendance, next to last. Wouldn't you think a senator who appointed himself would at least show up for work? Maybe he thought he could appoint himself
No, I'm
again.
sorry. Senator Anderson is not in today.
All of a sudden, the question arises, is Minnesota really going to elect 2 Republicans?
The analogy being used then was that you had 3 Republican elephants charging down the tunnel, and only 2 of them could get through it.
So there was real, I don't want to say alarm, but there was real concern about how this was all going to unfold. Ultimately, we elected 2 senators and a governor.
I was brought up in a home where foreign accents were very much in order, and so one of my goals was to get on the Foreign Relations Committee, and the second goal was to get on an Agriculture Committee.
His goal was to become the most knowledgeable person in the Senate on agriculture policy.
The Nixon administration entered into a major sale of grain, wheat, soybeans, corn to the Soviet Union. Corn prices tripled, wheat exports and soybean exports tripled, so it was a very, very huge increase in terms of production in the United States to meet that growing demand. Then came 1980, shortly after I joined up with Rudy, and President Carter announced a grain embargo against the Soviet Union and basically canceled 17 million metric tons of grain exports from the United States to the Soviet Union. That led to a devastating impact in terms of prices, in terms of production response.
We saw this series of foreclosures and declining land values and social stress in rural America. And these were really tough times. I mean, the farm depression of the early 1980s was a very dramatic thing for everyone who went through it.
Rudy understood that. He introduced with Senator Dole, who was an outstanding member of the Ag Committee and later to be majority leader and presidential candidate, joined him in providing assistance to farmers.
President Reagan has been in office for about a month. There's pressure on him to go ahead and fulfill his campaign promise to lift the embargo. And by late April, the embargo was gone. So I was in a really interesting situation of having gone from farming under the shadow of the embargo to being in a situation where I was a Senate staffer and I could actually work to help get rid of it.
Also, I was very active in dairy legislation. The dairymen, they kept telling me the price was too low. The government should give them a higher price. I said, if you want a higher price, you have to increase demand for the product. And they said, what do you mean demand for the product? Oh, well, if you can add a little syrup to sparkling water and call it Coca-Cola, maybe we ought to add some syrup to milk and give it some flavors. And that's what started the Milk House.
And there are those huge lines there waiting to get flavored milk from Rudy because he was there serving the milk himself. It was a great gimmick, but I think he genuinely liked being there at the fair and talking to people and meeting them, listening to their stories. And they obviously enjoyed his flavored milk.
Oh, we almost got kicked out once because you had to stay in the booth. And he would always walk out and talk to people on the sidewalk. And I forget what the number is, but if you had like 10 citations a week, they'd kick you out. And he was on the sidewalk all the time. But somehow we got by with it, and we kept doing that.
Those were long days. I'd get there fairly early in the morning and stay there into the evening, 10, 12 days in a row. And it was very nice. People don't come to senators' offices. They don't come to Washington as a whole or as a rule. And so you have to get near to them. And the fair was just an extraordinary place to do that.
It defined him at the state fair, and people would stop by. He was what had to do with milk.
By the time the Boschwitz campaign came along in '84, it just capitalized really well on 2 cycles of building that had gone on before it.
A lot of the advertising had to do on what Rudy did for others, his constituent service. The famous hardware store farmer who said, "Thanks, Rudy." And that became sort of the theme for that summer flight of commercials, very effective, and it fit with what Rudy had actually done in the Senate.
I think he wanted to apply business principles to agricultural policy. He was the guy who got the dairy checkoff done, that was the '85 Farm Bill, as I recall. And to this day, so the federal government takes a penny or something to promote dairy products.
Interestingly enough, that resulted in the famous Got Milk ad, which is considered one of the most successful ads in advertising history.
These are the most political issues: spending, taxes, Social Security. It's hard to think of another set of issues that are as politically dangerous as those issues. There was another side to Rudy Boschwitz.
He was a matchmaker. So he'd find out which reporters were single, and he'd try to hook them up with somebody to date.
Rudy's matchmaking was sort of legendary. He had matchmaking parties.
I started off in the Capitol, in one of the Capitol rooms, Senate rooms, and we had to take it off campus because we didn't have enough room in any of the Senate rooms, and it grew to 1,200. And we did it in hotels downtown. We did it in the summertime outdoors and made many matches. I liked that badge of honor. Our marriage has lasted 61 years and is going strong. It's worked very nice. It was the best day of my life when I married her.
Thank you. So far, so good. Yep.
So far.
I really love to sit and talk to him still because we have such interesting discussions. After all these years, we still have something to talk to each other about, which I like. But then we had some not such easy times, and then losing the election wasn't fun.
1990 came around, and there was a debacle in the Republican Party. And also in 1990, Rudy didn't get back to campaign that much because the Senate was in session late into the year. And I don't think that he took his opponent, Paul Wellstone, very seriously. Most people didn't. Wellstone, everybody thought, was a huge underdog. Few people thought he was going to win, at least early in the year.
We all thought that Paul Wellstone was going to be pretty easy, and he wasn't.
The 1990 election was a tough loss.
Yeah.
An unexpected in many ways.
Yes.
And that was difficult. But, it was a time where they took a little time off.
After he left the Senate, George H.W. Bush, the first President Bush, asked him to go to Ethiopia. There's a small Jewish community in Ethiopia. They're threatened. And Rudy went to Ethiopia and helped persuade the government there to let these people emigrate.
A dictator by the name of Mengistu, who overthrew the King Haile Selassie. And there was great starvation and great loss of life. And there I went to Ethiopia to negotiate with President Mengistu about allowing the Jews to go to Israel.
There's this great story about flying on a plane with some of these immigrants from Ethiopia to Israel. And the funny story was when they got on a plane, they'd never been on a plane before. And one of the things they decided to do was to make a meal while they were on the plane. So they started a fire on the plane and they had to put it out. And Rudy said it was a pretty amazing flight. It was fun to listen to his stories about those kinds of experiences. But, he was personally committed. He wanted to be there, and he wanted to make sure those people got out and got to safety.
2004, I was approached by W's administration. They were looking for an ambassador to the UN Human Rights Commission. It's now called the Human Rights Council. We passed 8 resolutions. We spoke very frankly about issues so that we tried to make it a more balanced approach. The Human Rights Commission was a very interesting experience.
It's so important to learn and be aware of what's going on in the world, and it's much more interesting if you have an awareness of more than just your kind of your bubble, if you will. And I've always admired that about Dad.
He is really passionate about helping people, and he's very creative and he's very tenacious.
He invested in all of us. He took the time to develop us professionally, but more importantly as people and as individuals.
He's a very decent human being. You just couldn't help but admire and try to actually operate in the same way that he did. He was a great role model.
Rudy Boschwitz, more than anything, is a loving, caring guy who really would go out of his way to help people. He wasn't doing it just for political reasons. He was doing it because he really genuinely cares about people and cares about the causes that they're involved in.
The policy matters, the politics matter, everything like that. But outside of maybe your immediate family, has anybody been a better friend to you in life than Rudy Boschwitz? And both of us immediately said no.
Yeah, and he likes helping people. I think he liked helping people back before he was in the Senate and while he was in the Senate and up until today. He just likes to help people in any number of ways.
Right.
I mean, if it's advice or if it's, it's one of the things that a lot of people remember about him, I think.
I see in Rudy Allen somehow their story resonates with my story. And I can only think of these places, of the Americas, as a better place with immigrants and with people like Ellen and Rudy.
He is a personification of the American dream.
The American dream is that anyone in our society who will work hard enough and who will show some imagination and some spunk can succeed and better himself and better his family. And it's still alive. And immigrants are still leading the way.
We're so lucky that we're in this country, that it's free, and there's plenty for everybody.
Coming into New York Harbor and my mother pointing out the Statue of Liberty, and then we went down the gangplank of the SS Majestic, and I said, when I stepped on American soil and my mother's hand, I was saved. Of our family that remained on the continent of Europe, one survived. So indeed, I was saved.
I think I have a pretty good understanding of what you feel about America, what you want to preserve, and the good things that you want to see happen. You know, I've met a lot of challenges in my life, and I'm going to do my best on this one, and I will not let you down.
Gather round, Minnesota, gather round. Rudy Boschwitz coming into town. He'll be part of you and me down in Washington, D.C. when the U.S. Senate gathers round, when the U.S. Senate gathers round.
Rudy Boschwitz, he's you and me, and that's what a Minnesota senator should be.
Well, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. We're not done yet, though. We want to spend a little time with the senator and the Boschwitz family. I want to first of all thank my friend Larry Jacobs and the Humphrey School. You saw Larry and doing a lot of the interview for that, and the Humphrey School helped us, as well as the University of Minnesota Foundation that helped us with this. But as you saw from the film, and everybody that knows Rudy knows this well, the Boschwitz family is a very tight-knit family. And the partnership between Rudy and Ellen and his sons is as admirable as his public service. So I'd like to turn it over at this point, if I could, to Ellen and Tom Boschwitz.
Okay, we're going to introduce Rudy, but first we have Tom and I have a little poem that we're going to do together. I know a man who carries books and notes wherever he goes, and his briefcase is stuffed with that, and it's a little worn.
His pockets bulge with overflow of ideas that his mind can't hold.
A somewhat fierce appearance due to the ample snow-white hair that usually needs a trim. Sharply deep-set eyes below the darkest brows above a jutting chin.
Oblivious to fashion or appearances, wearing plaid shirts without a tie beneath a well-worn jacket. Even seen in this attire at a black tie event, no wonder he's not atop anyone's soiree invitation list.
Stooped shoulders belie the weight of myriad tasks he sets out to do to help anyone who asks for his advice or to make the world a better place.
When raising money for a cause, he solicits at a daunting pace.
There's no refusing his urgent tone once he gets you on the phone.
Now at 90 years of age, his energy is undiminished until at last, I sigh with relief, finally a project is complete.
Sometimes I've wished he'd be more like those others, so in tune and up to date on everything that matters not to him.
Never appear on the cover of Vanity Fair or speak the language of the gentlemen and ladies depicted therein.
Nor is our house littered with books and his papers, a subject for Architecture magazine.
Does it really matter? Yes, but I've learned to live with all the clutter.
Except on a day when I simply have to make a fuss, which he doesn't hear, or maybe he does.
But after 64 years, the good really does outweigh the rest.
I have to say, it's been an adventure, so I'm sticking around to see what comes next.
Good.
Nice going, Mom.
Nice going, Tom.
Am I supposed to talk?
Except I didn't. No, not yet.
My turn? Well,
No, wait a minute, Dan and
oh, Dan.
Yeah, now it's our turn.
Oh, pardon me.
So I'm Dan. This is my wife Jill, and Vin and Steve and Joe. Thanks so much for the wonderful video. We really wish that our brother Jerry was here with us too to celebrate today. My brother Ken and I want to introduce my dad, entrepreneur, a U.S. Senator, emissary of the President, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Commission on Human Rights. But to my brothers, he's our dad. And throughout all the extraordinary things that he's done and is doing, he's always there for us and always able to step aside. Ken?
Well, I've said many times that they felt that both my parents, both our parents, felt that giving us a fair shot at life as kids was the ultimate act of love. And to this day, they continue that act of love. So anyway, without further ado, here's Rudy.
Well, I thank all of you. I think, yes, my sons, my wife, and I still say that best day of my life is when I married her. And the worst day of our life was when we lost our Gerb, our number one son. But life has been good to us. And it's not in the past tense by any means. The goal is to reconvene this group on my 100th birthday. We'd be married 75 years. And after that, well, then everybody's on his own. But it has been a terrific life. All these people you've seen have on this. I was going to talk about each one of them a little bit, but Steve Gordon and Brad Gordon and Arnie Christensen, who all these people who are on our staff have made vast contributions in Washington to our government. Dan Meyer, who you saw, and Arnie Christensen were chiefs of staff to Newt during his whole period of time. leadership in the House. Dan Meyer is now the Chief of Staff to Kevin McCarthy. And in between, he was also a chief in the Bush White House. Lots of very accomplished people have helped me along the way and have made possible some of the things that I've done. Point of pride is that we indeed, Dan Pearson, who you saw, Dan Pearson and I changed the way that agriculture and the government treat one another. And that was important, and that has a lasting value. And also, all of the matchmaking that we did with the Jewish kids, that was just a lot of fun for us, for Ellen and I. So life is going to continue. Life is going to go on. I have to say a word or two about my Senate years, and that is to say I was there for all 8 years of Reagan. And during that time, I was a member of the leadership of the Republican caucus. And so I went to meetings, 40 or 50 of them, with President Reagan in the cabinet room of the White House. Those were that was a high point of my service. And I lived in a very important time, the Cold War with Russia. And it was really a Cold War that was very dangerous. And then 3 people came in the 80s. Pope Paul II, John Paul II, Mrs. Thatcher, who noted that Ronald Reagan won the Cold War without firing a shot. And indeed he did. And one of my points of pride is that I voted with him to strengthen the military of this country, to strengthen the government of this country as well. And that's what I am proud of from being in the Senate. I thank again people who watched today, and 225, they say. That's as many as my friend who's now going to be president, apparently, Joe Biden, as many as he had at any of his meetings. Maybe I should. But in any event, life is good, and it's been good for a long time, and it's going to continue on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rudy, Ellen, Tom, Dan, Kenny. We appreciate so much your cooperation in making all this, and add to Rudy's point, Jerry Boschwitz was enormously helpful throughout the project, and we all miss him very much. Thanks to everybody who participated this afternoon, and we all wish Rudy a happy birthday, and we'll get to work right away, Rudy, on that 100th birthday celebration coming 10 years from now. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.